and welcome to Gauntlet Podcast. Each month we look back at the games that we've played on Gauntlet and games played by other Gauntlet folks. With me today is Jamila Najati.
Hi.
Hello, Jamil.
Hi, Sherry. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
And with us today as our guest is Spencer Stark. Hi, Spencer.
Hi, so glad to be here.
And I'm Sherry Stewart. And so we're just going to leap right in with our first segment, which is always where we each talk about the games that we played in the month. For this month, we're talking about the games we played in May. Jamila, why don't you tell us about what you played?
I slowed down a little for the month. So off the Gauntlet, I continue playing a lot of solo games. During these times, it's a thing that helps us.
Yeah, no, it's
through.
definitely meditative in some ways, depending on the game, I guess, but yeah.
Absolutely, right. And so, in particular, I've really been enjoying the Wretched and Alone game jam. So this is a game jam on Itch.io where they offered a systems reference document for the system Wretched and Alone. It follows this very specific idea of you set up a tumbling block tower, and then you pull cards. Usually it's a normal playing card deck, and then it's like a choose your own adventure, except the choice has been taken away from you a little bit because you're drawing cards. It depends. And then some of the cards will tell you to pull from the tower. And then once the tower falls, the game ends. But there are other ways the game can end. So the original game was based on some horror stuff, but the games are so interesting. Like, I played this one about a fake guru, you know, those kinds that like do really well on the internet and stuff. I love that one.
Sure.
That one is really good. So it's been a lot of fun. I've been doing that off the Gauntlet a lot. And then on the Gauntlet, I got to play This Discord Has Ghosts in It, Apocalypse Keys. We're continuing to playtest that. Fellowship, that's a long series that's been really fun to get into. Oathbreakers, Brinkwood, Hearts of Wulin, specifically the Supernatural playset. Changeling, the Lost PPTA hack. I'm running Changeling the Lost, so that's been really, really fun. And we got to finish up Take My Revolution, and Through a Mirror Darkly is another playtest. I'm running a lot of playtests, but
we appreciate that as designers. Yeah, we appreciate that a lot. So
yeah.
Thank you.
Playtesting is a conversation on its own, but I just really enjoy it. I was so traumatized the first time I made a game, how different the game was from my head to what the actual experience was like. It has haunted me all these years that I need to play test.
Yes, as a fellow designer, I appreciate every time I get to sit in a playtest, because not only do you get to help the person who's running the game, but also you learn a whole bunch just being there.
Right, and seeing the bits and pieces. I really like it too, sitting in other people's playtests. It's fascinating. A lot of fun. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the fun thing about the Gauntlet is we get to have that a lot because we have quite a few people making games here too, so that's super fun.
Hacking and designing whole new cloth ones. So
yeah.
It's been a lot of fun. Lately, it seems like extra playtest rich, so very fun.
Absolutely.
So tell us about Through a Mirror Darkly, though.
Through a Mirror Darkly is a sci-fi horror game mainly inspired by Event Horizon, but there's also quite a bit of Solaris, and then there's like a bit of Alien, the movies, the series, a bit of Sunshine for aesthetic and tropes. And the thing with Through a Mirror Darkly is it's strictly a one-shot because I wanted to emulate the movies, and I wanted to keep pushing the idea of like, what does it take to design a really good one-shot? That's what I really wanted to.
Totally.
Yeah, right? Because it's a very different thing.
It's a very distinct thing, yes.
Absolutely. So I wanted to do that. And it's also a belonging outside belonging game. I just love the system because a lot of people are experimenting with it and trying new things. So what I was trying to do with this one is I like belonging outside belonging games where the players really are more like, instead of no GM, everybody's a GM. That's what I like.
GM full games. Yeah,
exactly. And then, but the thing is when I run or play other belonging outside belonging games, I'm just going to short it to BOB because I can't say that all the time. But when I play other BOB games, I noticed that a lot of players, you can't help it. It's hard to switch because you're so used to there being a GM.
Yeah.
Or I wanted to really strictly put in obvious GM moves in each playbook. So, for example, out of the 6 playbooks, each one has a number of moves, like 2 moves that are describing the horror that they have to deal with. So, for example, the captain has, say how the horror embodies what haunts you, describe how the horror comes closer, describe how the horror has us in its grasp. But then the sentinel will have, describe how the horror has separated us, describe how the horror revealed our weakness.
Sure.
Yeah, so, like, it's fun because, like, it builds up on it. I was hoping it would come off that way, and surprisingly, it did. This is always, like...
Yes. Amazing.
Sigh of relief.
The magical feeling.
Like, it worked as intended. What a miracle. And so, what I really like about it is, so the idea is that the horrors are created by the players, and it builds upon what sins, regrets, or secrets the characters have, which, what's nice about BOB is that you get to have pick lists, so there's a lot to inspire the player, but of course, they can make up whatever they like, so...
Yeah, it's always good to have that little bit of inspiration, at least, like, even just to provide flavor, right? Because, like, I've seen, like, if there's no pick lists for people to choose from, especially in PBTA games or whatever, like, or even in character creation during games where they're, like, they just give you a list of things you can choose from, you can make up your own, but, like... just providing it gives people flavor enough to be able to come up with their own ideas, right? If there's nothing there, it feels like a blank page.
They know what they have permission to say.
Exactly.
Like, right?
Yeah, and I really like that because I feel, especially in a one-shot, but in any game, I want players to feel like they can hit the ground running, they can be inspired, they can get into their creativity, because I think a really good pick list is, it's evocative on its own, but it asks you, can you build on this? What is this sparking in you, right? It's not the end of the choice. So, for example, one of the playbooks I have is The Survivor, very much built on Ripley from the Alien movies. And from the pick list for choosing what haunts you, you can choose things like, the horror speaks to me in ways no one else can hear. I shouldn't have been the one who survived. My lover was used by the horror to kill my last crew. And I created a clone of myself. I have outlived everyone I've ever loved, and so on and so forth. So, and then from here, so you pick what haunts you, and then later when you're playing the game, you describe how the horror embodies that. So it could be literal, or it could be something metaphorical. And in the few playtests I've had about 4 now, it's so different each time how people choose to embody that, and that's really,
great.
Really fun. Also, instead of setting elements, so setting elements are a normal thing in BOB, but I tweak that a little bit. So what happens is when a character chooses to die, so, well, it's more like maybe the character doesn't choose, but when a player decides the character is dead, right, sure, is going to die, what happens is that they can then switch over to playing the haunted ship instead. So they become part of the ship.
Oh, cool.
And so the playbooks of this ship are called The Heart of the Palantir, because the ship's name is the Palantir, the Stark Mirror. The names of the setting playbooks are The Heart of the Palantir, The Teeth, The Flesh, The Blood. And I have so much fun seeing players decide, am I going to be the teeth? Am I going to be the flesh? It's really good fun. It really gets people into the mood.
Yeah, so evocative. That's super cool.
Yeah, and it's really fun because the idea is, if depending on which one you play, the horrors twist in a certain way. So it could become more body horror, it could become more emotional horror, depending on how it goes. So that's really fun.
Totally.
So, of course, there are some things I'm less sure about. So what I'm less sure about is that, number one, there aren't as many deaths as I thought there would be. So in each playtest, I've only had 1 death so far, because I kind of wanted the idea of, like, there's one survivor, and then most of us are not playing the ship. Right. And so sure. I kind of wanted to do that. I think I might just outright at the next playtest say, can most of us die, if that's all right? Just to see if this is still fun. But I'm also wondering, should I mechanically shift it so there's more incentives? But then how much do I want it to be mechanical? How much should it just be open? So these are thoughts I have. And also about the ship playbooks, these are really based on my GMing style. It has a question you ask, just to ensure safety, right? Because you're embodying the horror and you're voicing the horror. You ask a question, and then from there you immediately build on it and create an action. And I notice it's not as easy to pick up, but then once again, not everybody's dying. So I don't know. So I have to test that a bit more if it's really just reflecting my personal GMing style and it's not coming through as much.
Thank you, Jamila. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to talk about the games that I played this month, and as with Jamila, my May was much lighter than April, for good and for bad. I didn't get to see my Gauntlet pals as much, but I did get to sleep a little bit more, so that was good.
That's important. That is important. Yes.
So off Gauntlet, I played Monster of the Week. I played 13th Age, played Star Trek Adventures Express, which is a sort of a terrible hack of it where we went, we don't really know what these mechanics are doing, so X them out and let's just see if we can play without them. So that's what we're doing. And then Hearts of Wulin Supernatural playbooks.
Yeah.
And all of those have been really fun and enjoyable with our face-to-face people who are now online, which is really weird but fun. On Gauntlet, I got to play Oathbreakers. We finished that up in May, and it was a wondrous game. That's the one thing is Eli is the most best evil player to have in your game because you just enjoy how much he enjoys being evil. It's great.
So good, so good.
It was good, wasn't it? We played Changeling the Lost, PBTA hack. We had finished up, or almost finished up one segment of it, and then Jamila is running another, so that's super fun. And then also played Hit the Streets, which is Super's game by Rich Rogers that delivered from its Kickstarter just this last month. And played This Discord Has Ghosts in it, and played the last little bit of Power Beyond Doubt, which is what I'm going to talk about today. Power Beyond Doubt is another game that's in playtest. So we really are playing a lot of playtest on Gauntlet. And we're playing a lot of regular games that have actually made it to maturation, but there's been a lot of fun playtestiness going on lately. And so Power Beyond Doubt, which is also known as, and was formerly known as, Project Lycra, is a PBTA Supers RPG that was described to me as sort of an adult version of Masks. So that's kind of what I was expecting when I went into it. The designer is Jen Kitzman, a.k.a. Helcycat on Patreon, and that's Halcycat. And I want to spell that out. We'll also put it in the notes so that you can go and check it out if you're interested in the game, because she has a lot of the free materials for the game available.
Oh, cool.
On her Patreon
That's
site.
great.
Yeah, so you can find the playtest materials that we were playing with. Now, the one thing I'm going to say is that though it's described to me as an adult version of Masks, it's definitely not Masks. Okay?
Ooh.
Masks is very much a teen super where they're like sort of maneuvering and trying to figure out their sense of self and identity, sort of in the face of an adult world. Who like says you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know anything. Keeps denying their readiness to choose in some ways. Power Beyond Doubt is really about a super who has a public identity, a role within their team, their group, and how well they're regarded seriously impacts what the outcome is of their actions. Instead of your stats being moved around by other players like you do in Masks, it's only does the public trust you? Does your team trust you? So you have these two stats that get moved around, and
just two.
Base, so the base definition of yourself is your own. You are who you are. It's how people perceive you.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's sort of a game about dealing with the things that you don't have control over, but these are perception as opposed to your own sense of identity.
Right.
So you're tracking public confidence and team trust, and those are the things that go up and down. The thing is that your actions and your choices feed into how well you're regarded, and since the other players, just like in Max, can move your confidence and your trust back up and down. They can say, well, I think the public thought that was a really horrible thing that you did, so their confidence in you has gone down.
Wow.
Or, everyone in the team knows you were trying your best, so trust goes up. That's kind of the conversation you're having.
Cool.
But one of the things that's interesting about the game is it also goes into a set of things that Masks didn't bother with because it was very caught up in the identity idea and the sort of genre of teen supers, which is pretty much just doing whatever as things spring up.
Yeah.
This one goes, no, you're in a team. They actually have team mechanics where you can build up with other folks to do things that will level playing field between you and bad guys or bad situations that would be far outside the power of any one of you, where you're assisting each other and stuff like that. So there's these really nice mechanics for that, and for getting together to figure out how you're going to go to something. There's these rewarding mechanics that help you do that without having to be really invested in the right answer. There's a thing with trad games. you had to figure out what the GM was wanted you to figure out, right?
Right.
This is one of those things. Is it lets you get around that where there are moves where you get together and you guys decide what's going on.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense, and then you address that. So it's sort of that kind of thing, and it's just how many complications or little bits might be. How many fronts have you left for the GM to put in front of you? So it's very fun. But it does really lean into adult problems, but the struggle isn't for your identity. It's definitely about the perception of your identity. So what worked for me is that it really does feel a lot less teenage in some ways. It is less self-absorption and more of trying your hardest or trying to figure out what you need to do and having to deal with how do people see you? How does your team see you? Even whatever. So that kind of going back and forth, you try, and there's this neat mechanic of, let's say that the public really, really has full confidence in you. If it gets high enough, they look at you as a hero. And any mistake you make after that causes a big problem.
Wow.
So it's like the higher you go, the harder you fall, you know? And it's very much that sort of thing. Same with the trust. They trust you so much that it actually starts to cause problems because they go, they've got it. And you're not going to get the assistance. You're going to mess up because they've given you so much leeway. That's just the kind of fallout that comes from those things. So there's a thing of you get too good or too bad, there'll be a thing where something bad will happen and everything will reset.
Like it's super extreme. You know, that's so funny because that's such a cultural thing for me because here I can only really speak for Manila in the Philippines. I feel like it's the opposite where if you've reached this point where everyone loves you, because the way we talk about our celebrities and our politicians, we talk about them on a first name basis, even if we don't know the person. So to put it in American context, instead of saying like Tom Cruise, or I should say someone more Robert Downey Jr. Anyway, so people will say things like, "Oh, you know, the thing with Robert is that ever since he got married," like they'll talk like super personally,
casually,
like as if they're friends. Yeah, it's so weird. And then, so once people here locally reach this point of, oh, we can count on this person, or we have so much confidence in them, there is nothing they can do wrong. Like, we've had actresses and actors like just go in through the airport with an extreme amount of contraband and bad things, and people here will be like, oh, I'm sure they have an explanation for it. Right? There's no such thing as being canceled here locally, right? Like canceling is a concept we don't really grasp. But this is still very true to genre because like comics and superheroes is a very American cultural thing. So
that is definitely it. The thing in the comic books is definitely, you know, the higher you go, when you make a mistake, then you feel really bad and there's all this angst and the public is writing stories about what a horrible human being is.
Like Spider-Man and
exactly. It's just it's all, you know, the heights, the depths, the heights, the depths. So
good.
So you kind of got that going on, but it's perfectly outside of yourself in some ways. I mean, you make a mistake and they really come down on you or something. Or if you're not held in trust and you make a mistake, they go, yeah, I told you. You know?
Right.
So it's really good. One of the things that also struck me was the playbooks for Power Beyond are not like grown up, you know, insert mass playbook here. That is not what's going on.
Oh, cool.
Instead, went and did the gamut of all the adult supers tropes. So here I'm saying adult supers. Adult supers are the default,
just supers.
Right? So
yeah.
They're not just supers. But essentially, there's a playbook if you wanted to play like someone like Iron Man, Batman, John Constantine, Hawkeye, Superman, Wonder Woman, Hulk, all of those, except maybe more on a city scale than nation scale. And of course, they're not called that. They're just, they have... But I'm not going to say what the playbooks are called because I'm sure those will change over time.
Yeah, totally.
But you could play all of those and probably any other one if you wanted by taking the start of one and finding a few abilities from another one. But yeah, you could play all of those. That's essentially what it's set for, is to play those kinds of paradigms. The thing is that the game, they have these team mechanics and they have what they call B-plot moves, which are not exactly basic moves.
Oh, that's cool.
They're downtime moves.
Smart.
That aren't when you're being a super, but when you're being your person self. And they are fun. It was our group could not let go of the B-plot. We were like, let's get out of this fight so we can go B-plot.
Yep.
And it was just super fun. So those are really great. They are kind of all those interstitial life moves and times and things, and they were terrific. We had so much fun with those, and they were really a weird thing because you would expect that they would be things that would take people off screen and they're on their own and stuff. But in some ways, they did a really good job of giving you a little perfect highlight moment that was incredibly satisfying. And then it was back to the team and it felt good. It was their nice compressed slice of life moves that just are really effective. But if there was anything I was less sure about, part of it was my own kind of like thing of when I transitioned into the game from a mask character, I hadn't actually gone and looked at Power Beyond Doubt. So I kind of was like going, oh, I have this mask character, and since this is kind of like adult mask, I'm just going to go bloop, bloop, and I'll have something. And I didn't. And those paradigms did not match up with the paradigm of my character. So I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? And I kind of like, I had to come up with this backstory. And I was like, oh God, the only one that sort of fits my abilities is this one called Tarnished. So all of a sudden I'm playing a sort of Constantine, like someone who has a bad rep and does business with the seedy side or the
underbelly
underworld and all that. Yeah, exactly. So I was like, oh gosh, it's a complete reconception of my character. So I'm like straining to do that. It's like my brain was, and it took me a while to actually, how do you say, get a feel for the playbook as it was itself instead of me trying to stretch it around the concept
instead of like your
character.
preconceived notion of what it would be.
Exactly. So I was struggling with the playbook instead of enjoying the playbook. And then once I got it, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. A little too late. But still. And then I had a good time.
I have a question about that. The way that the game is made, was it really intended? Like, you're supposed to play from... Oh, okay.
I think that it is not intended to go from masks to Power Beyond Doubt.
I see.
It's that it has some of the same, like, themes and ideas about what affects the supers, and it's about, essentially identity.
Right.
But does that make
it's like an emotional...
Right.
Yeah, it's an emotional take on superheroes in a way.
Exactly.
Which is, I think, what resonates with masks so much for me, anyways. And so, yeah, it sounds like it's sort of that same take, but with adults and the problems that adults have to deal with. That's fascinating. I like that.
Yeah.
So one of the things, though, is they do have that confidence and trust that's moving up, and when they get extreme, there's a point at which that's a trigger, and it does... a bad thing happens and it resets. The mechanics for that were head scratchers for us. And I don't know if it's because we got caught in the playtest where the rules were changing or if all of us read it a little differently or what.
Sure.
So that was one of those things where when it happened, it's probably a thing that you as GM and you as a player all want to get a sense of, this is what's going to happen. This is what it looks like. This is what it's simulating. Everything in the game has a real purpose. I know that there's a panel that would go along with those things, a comics panel that, anyone who knows comics really well could picture. But I don't think we were all picturing the same panel when we went into it. But again, we were in playtest and the docs were changing at that moment.
Sure,
so that was it. That was my experience of it, was like, wait, what are we doing? Okay.
Yeah. Why is this happening? Yeah.
Why is this happening? Okay.
Why does everybody hate me? Why does everybody hate me suddenly? Okay, got it. Cool.
Yes, okay, got it. Yeah. So, and then some of the character types have moves, and dare I say they come from a tradition of the loner hijinks. And that means that getting into that meaty team play can sometimes have to wait when you're not Batman, wants to stare off at the rooftops, And,
because it's such an important part of the archetype.
Exactly. And so they're archetyping rather than, and everyone else is eating shawarma down there and the thing. But that's always a risk with supers, isn't it?
Yeah.
You get that character and you really love those conventions and tropes and you're off doing your thing and the rest of the group's going, hey, we're over here, kind of, okay, guys.
Yeah. Like how to mechanically support, not punish the player for leaning into that archetype, right? Because if you gave me a Batman archetype, I will Batman it. I will full on Batman.
Everyone would, right? So it's just and that's it. So but I think that's just inherently a part of play where there are loner tropes that are part of the convention. So that's a struggle. That's an all super struggle.
It's a genre struggle, right?
Genre struggle, yes.
Yeah, for sure.
But my takeaway is that, like Masks, Power Beyond Doubt really offers up a ton of emotional play, but it's centered around, the struggle of the self is seen by others. So that's what the difference is. Unlike Masks, it gives the team some really interesting mechanics. I mean, really great mechanics for leveling the playing field and for playing and feeling like a team.
Cool. Yeah, because in the original Masks is just scrambling. Points! Yes, I'll help you. Yeah, which is part of being a teenager, right?
You're essentially, you do a setup. You can choose to pass some power on to the next person who's going to use your power, or you're just setting it up and continuing it so you can get it around to the person who's going to strike that.
It's like volleyball.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's so important to the adult superhero genre. Yeah,
it really is. That is like super. So I mean, it feels good. It feels good and natural when you're playing it. It's super fun because you're going, oh, what's my set?
Yeah.
Who am I going to pass it to? So, and right now the game is in playtest, but it's seriously close to being whole and right and rough edges smoothed out. So go and take a look at it.
Cool, I'm very excited.
It is at Jen's Patreon, so that's Healthy Cat at Patreon, and that's HALCYCAT. And it is a super fun game. Go and take a look at the materials that she has out there that are for free. See if it looks like something you and your group would enjoy playing.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Yeah. So Spencer, tell us what you played in May.
Yeah, so I've been in a design fury the past couple months because Kids on Brooms, which was my game that's coming out from Renegade in August, based on Kids on Bikes, but in a sort of Harry Potter sort of world or inspired universe, that was in development at the same time as Alice is Missing, which is the thing that I ran on Gauntlet this month, or last month, I guess. So between those two, I mean, I've just been in like absolute playtest mode, trying to get all of that done. So those are my main two focus. I have been playing a Blades in the Dark campaign with some friends from overseas, so that's been really fun. And also playtesting a game called Resistance, which is made by one of them, and it's very, very good. It's sort of a rising up against the powers that be. You could play it in Cyberpunk. You could play it in Rome.
So
like it's just
malleable.
basically it's sort of
nice.
if you know Icarus, where Icarus is about like the fall of a civilization, and it can be in any sort of setting, right? This is a similar sort of thing where you can set it anywhere, but the conceit of the game is always we are the rebels and we are rising up against the power. So you could play Star Wars in it if you wanted. It would totally support Star Wars.
Oh, see,
but
it's I feel activated for sure.
So I'm not sure when it's dropping or when he's going to put it, anywhere, but I'm very excited for it. It is all using a pack of cards, and it's really great. So I'm excited for that. I don't know what state it's in yet, but those are some games I was playing in May. And I'm trying to think about if there's anything else. I think between all my playtesting and all my getting ready for the dropping of my two games, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
But the game I want to talk about is Alice is Missing, which is on Kickstarter right now. And it is a silent role-playing game about the disappearance of Alice Briarwood, a high school junior in this small town of Silent Falls. And the entire game is played via text messages between players. So there's no speaking. When the game begins, it plays over 90 minutes, and then the game is done.
Wow.
So it's a one-shot, sort of event-style, very focused game that tries to emulate like Life is Strange or Oxenfree, Gone Home, Firewatch, those kinds of... It's a weird genre. It's like the indie emotional game genre, right? In like video games.
Oh my gosh, that's a perfect way to describe it.
But because they all kind of share that same aesthetic and that same feel, and I love
the same
all
music.
Of those
I can hear the music right now.
So
bring up those games.
Yeah, so it's an interesting genre that I don't think has been tapped into all that much.
Yeah,
it's not even like a genre. I mean, it's sort of a subgenre, right? Or I don't know what it is. It covers a wide breadth of styles of play, but like everybody knows that feeling, and so I wanted to capture that feeling.
It's really emerging. Yeah, because I think it's not fully formed yet. But I definitely agree.
Yeah, it's definitely a burgeoning kind of genre. But anyway, I was aiming to capture that through this game, and luckily I got it picked up by Renegade Games and Hunters Entertainment, and so it is being published. It's going to go to Kickstarter, and then it's going to be in game stores, which is wild for a game this weird to be actually out in stores is going to be nuts.
Will you describe the form factor of it? Because this is really different.
Yeah.
In the sense of, you're saying 90 minutes, and I'm like thinking, okay, what do you mean 90 minutes? What's doing the 90-minute limit?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about it. So it's all card-based, and it's GM-less.
Ooh.
So essentially you have character cards that sort of give you your starting character to jump off from. They already have names because this game is very one-shot specific.
Right.
It's very event style, so you'll probably play this game with a group and then probably not play it with that group again. And if you do, you'd pick it up maybe a couple months down the road and play it again. It's designed specifically for that to be an immersive event-style experience. I've named them so that you get up and running quickly. So there's people like Jack Briarwood, who's the older brother. There's Dakota Travis, who's the best friend. There's Julian North, who's the secret girlfriend. Ooh. Evan Holwell, who's the one with the crush. So you sort of have these archetypes to fill.
Yeah.
And each of the cards has 3 things on it. It has a background question that you share with everybody. So the game tends to go into more of an emotional space. It focuses on that. So like Jack's is, why has your and Alice's home life been so difficult recently? Right? So you sort of get that like initial setup of things have been tough. And then you have their secret, and that's something that they keep to themselves for now, but then reveal and play. So that might be something like, I think on Jack's, it's you and Alice got into a fight the night before she left. What was it about? You also have a voicemail. And so before the game begins, you record that voicemail away from the other players. And
Ooh,
that
really?
is the last voicemail that you left Alice before you knew that she was missing. And it has a prompt, and it also has you wrap in your secret into that voicemail. So at the end of the game, after everything is done, all of those voicemails play. And we sort of get that.
This is so on point with the genre. It's so good. I really feel like this is a video game.
I can feel the feels being made. Okay, yes.
Good. You also have these drive cards that they give you your motive during the game, and they also give you relationships that you tie, sort of like bonds that you tie to the other characters at the table. So they might be things like, you and I used to be best friends, or I don't think you've ever liked me, or like something like that. So it creates these tensions between you, or it's like, I'm protective of you, or you know a secret about me that I don't want shared, right? And so we can sort of establish these relationships between the characters at the table before we begin. There's also locations and suspects that will come out during the game, and there's decks of those. And then there are clue cards. And clue cards are kind of the driving feature of the game. They essentially have a big number on the back that goes from 90 to 10. And they count down in 10-minute intervals, except there are in the middle or near the climax, they move down to 5-minute intervals.
Oh, intervals of the actual game.
So like, 90, 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, 45, 30, 35, 20, 10. And there's a bunch of those so that it's different every game. And you flip over the clue card and then you it'll tell you like, draw a suspect card or draw a location card. So it might be like, draw a suspect card. You went to the police with a lead, but they ignored you. What about this person makes you feel like they might be involved? And that's one that would be at the very beginning of the game. So it's like, guys, I really think that, and you draw the suspect card and let's say it's Ryan Grogan's the ex-boyfriend. And you're like, guys, I saw Ryan going through her locker on Friday when she wasn't there. It was weird. And he definitely was trying to find something in there. And I don't know what was happening. I told the police, but they didn't. And you're doing all this through text message. So
yeah,
it's
I was
like,
about to say. So
you're
just
sending
there,
all
like,
of this, right? And so then you're having this conversation. They're like, did you see what he got out of there? And you're like, no, I couldn't see it. But like, he knew that she hadn't been at school for the last 2 days. Why would he be breaking into her locker? Kind of thing. So those clue cards sort of ramp up over, between 90 and 10. As that happens, you're flipping more suspects and more locations, and there's multiples in the deck. So like the same suspect might come out twice or might come out 3 times, right? And that makes them more likely to be the culprit.
Or a red herring. Yeah.
Or a red herring, yeah, exactly. No, totally. I mean, we've had that kind of thing happen before, and it's a shock. But
cool.
Everything's happening silently, and so you're all just on your phone, and you're seeing the cards turn, whether you're doing it on Roll20 or whether you're doing it in person. You're seeing the cards that are coming out, and so everybody has an idea of what are the locations that are suspicious, what are the people that have come up a lot in this game, and then behind the scenes look at the way the mechanics work. At the 30-minute card, instead of the player drawing a suspect, they take all the face-up suspects and they shuffle them, and they pull one. And it's like, this is, it basically explains to you why you know this person, or it asks you a very specific question about why you know this person is responsible, right? It gives you a scenario, gives you a setup, and then says, you know that this is the culprit. How do you know? And it'll give you prompts, so that's not like that open-ended, but more or less. And then suddenly you know who's responsible, and then the 20-minute card is a location. You shuffle all the locations that have come out, you pull one, and that's where she is. And you know that she's there, and somebody has to go get her. And whoever's going to find her takes the 10-minute card. And at 10 minutes, they turn that over, and that gives you your climax of the game.
Wow.
And yeah, so it's all sort of happening, without anybody speaking, which is this weird sort of immersive, almost feels like an ARG in ways.
Yeah.
During that time, the timer is also counting down, and the soundtrack is playing. So there's a soundtrack, there's a licensed soundtrack that plays, that does the, you're saying I can hear the music.
Yeah,
it
exactly.
plays. So we've
Oh my
licensed some incredible tracks from artists. We have a Message to Bears track that Message to Bears is the band that did some music for Life is Strange, and I was like, I need that same sort of feel. And so Jerome from Message to Bears was kind enough to license us some of the music that he's written, which is included. So yeah, so you'll have this sort of cinematic soundscape that's happening as you're all sitting there in silence, sharing this dramatic tale that unfolds.
My partner, he loves this genre. Like, he's really
good. Cool.
He has bought every game you have mentioned. He has played them multiple times because, right, a lot of these games, they get more fun the more you play them.
Yes. Yeah.
Like with Oxenfree and Life is Strange.
Oh,
and
yeah, so good.
Hearing you describe the mechanics, it feels like this really interesting meld with TTRPGs and video games that I really like, because like sometimes the discussion of TTRPGs, I get bothered by people who are like, well, it's better than a video game.
Right.
that kind of, it's like, I don't play video games, I just play TTRPGs. and like, I feel like, but they're both cool.
The snobby TTRPG players. Yep. No.
Right.
No, and what's interesting is that, you know, it's all happening digitally. It's all interfacing digitally on your phone.
Yeah,
or on
but
Discord if you want
right.
to. Yeah, and you can be, or, I mean, honestly, I've had to do the last couple months of playtesting before we launch remotely because we've not been able to be in each other's houses. And so that's even more interesting because we're isolated. And in the game, there's like there's a couple of like game guide bumpers to keep in mind, and one of them is no two characters can be in the same place at once. If you would be, find a way in the narrative for that not to be, because you have to be texting. You can't just be like, hey, let's all go meet at Jack's house, and then everybody goes to meet at Jack's house and there's no reason to text, right? So because of that, suddenly when you're playing the game, you are alone and you're actually isolated as opposed to being in the same place as everybody. And so that creates an extra level of immersion that's interesting. But yeah, you're interfacing with the phone, which feels like a video game, but you're doing it with your friends collaboratively, where they're creating the story, like all of the clues are coming through them, and so it sort of generates, it's like playing an RPG and a video game all at once. Yeah,
that is so
That is really cool. A little bit of investigation, a little bit of all those things. So here's my thing. You said it, you have like these guidelines and helper things. Yeah. That's really important. As both Jamila and I noted, we played this Discord has ghosts.
Oh yeah,
which is a play it on Discord, and like the ghosts only type and the Ghostbusters only
speak, right? Yeah, okay.
The investigators.
But they kind of set up the structure of like how the rooms work, and then there's no other guidelines.
There's no
and
guidelines.
It was like super chaotic, which was
such
maybe
a mess.
part of the experience. It was a terrifying mess first, and then it became a terrifying game. But it was.
Sure.
But I'm interested about these guidelines, so give us some sense of those.
To sort of approach the game as a RPG, right? We have this social contract that says we are all playing this game collaboratively. We are all going into this knowing that the goal of this game is not to win. The goal of this game is to tell a great story, right? And we're going to have this transcript at the end of the game of all of our text messages, whether that's the group chat that we all have or the individual messages that we're sharing. Now, honestly, the individual messages, those are where the game really shines. Like, that's where I find myself getting lost the most, because we're having these conversations about the conversations that are happening in the group chat. And so then it becomes this extra layer of immersion, because you're talking with other people, and then you're talking with everybody, and then you're talking with just the person that you've pulled to the side, and being like, hey, what Jack said was not cool, and I'm sorry that he like came at you like that. You don't deserve that kind of thing. And you can have these moments of connection with people that are really important and really, I think, indicative of the genre. But that social contract is in place, that we are playing a game that's collaborative. But outside of that, this game guide does things like make sure you tell everyone the information from your clue card. The answer to your clue card question will determine how the game's narrative evolves. So it's like, hey, make sure you tell people what's going on, right? Like just these little hints of things like, or you should investigate and speculate based on the clues you receive, but you'll not find the information that actually leads you to Alice until a card tells you that you do. So these things that are kind of, for story gamers, might be a little more intuitive, but for people that haven't played GM-less games, might not be, and might be nice reminders of the kind of system we're running, because it's not about winning. It's not about, because somebody could very well just go, hey guys, I found Alice, she's okay, and the game is done if there's no guidelines for that, right? But that's not the way the game functions. So it's important to sort of set these boundaries in place. We have things like it's okay to have moments where nothing happens. Silence can and will occur during the game. When the group chat goes quiet, consider initiating private conversations with other characters. As just a reminder that, like, hey, the nature of group chats is that you're going to have a flurry of messages, and then there's going to be nothing. And in those moments of nothing, that's where it can be the most impactful to reach out and go, hey, are you doing okay? What do you need?
Ooh.
That's kind of the approach with the game guide. There's also some safety precautions that are gone over in there. We have a digital kind of X card. You can X stuff out during the game. We also do lines and veils, obviously, up top. And because of the nature of the genre and of the game itself, there are topics that you run into that are intense and adult. And so I think of it like Monster Hearts in the way that I approach the lines and veils, right? Like, there are things that we will get into that are dark and that are difficult to talk about, and the game wants us to go there. It encourages us to go there. But if there's things that we don't want to have on the table, we line and veil those immediately up front, and they aren't in the game.
Cool. You said that you played it online.
Yeah.
Essentially, how does that work? Do you have like the soundtrack playing? Everyone's listening to that, and then are you using still phones, or are you using like Slack or some other?
The way that I prefer to play it, and it depends on the comfortability of your players, especially if you're like at a con or something, you can very well use Discord, and I have a Discord template that we're going to put up with the game that you can use that will set it up. So all you have to do, and I would recommend if you're going to use Discord to download the Discord app on your phone so that it still feels like texting, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because that's sort of a really cool tactical kind of thing. Not everybody needs a computer. Like, it feels very immersive still. But my preferred way with people that I trust with having my phone number is to play it via text. And we change all of our contacts to be the characters.
So badass.
And if you're with a group that's really dedicated, we'll all pull pictures and change our contact photos.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Yeah, and then the way that the online feature works is that I have it set up in Roll20, so all the card decks are in there, and there's we're going to have a Roll20 marketplace item, so you're going to be able to buy the setup, essentially, that I've done for the game, and there's a bunch of rooms, and they lead you through character creation, the whole setup for the game, and then in gameplay, there's what looks kind of like a table mat that you would use for a card game that has different sections where you lay cards down as they come out. And so, so you're using Roll20 as your virtual table. I usually recommend that you have 2 tabs on your browser when you're doing it. One of them is Roll20, and the other one is the YouTube playlist, because the playlist is up on YouTube, up on the Hunters YouTube, and will be available during the campaign. If by now the campaign is hopefully alive and running, and so you can actually listen to the whole playlist on there already. But yeah, you pull that up in the second tab, and I usually just live with the playlist on my main screen until it hits the time of my card. So, like, let's say I have the 50 card, right? When the timer hits 50, I'll switch to the tab with Roll20. Flip my card, pull the suspect or location card, look at the 2 together, figure out what they mean to me, and then return to the timer tab and text everybody.
Neat.
Yeah, that sounds so cool. And I like how there's so many different ways for people to play, like really taking into account what people will think is fun or exciting for them. So
text messages feel less personal than speaking in person most of the time, right? So you'd think that there would be it'd feel less personal. But what happens is, when I'm speaking to somebody that's sitting in a chair next to me, or, this game it's kind of a secret LARP. Shh, don't tell anybody. But it kind of is, right? You're in character for 90 minutes. You're playing that character the whole time. It's sort of a LARP. Don't tell anybody. I said that.
It's just our secret.
It's our secret. Don't tell anybody.
Absolutely.
But one of the things it does is that whether I'm playing in a LARP or whether I'm playing in an RPG, there takes an element of suspension of disbelief to look across the table to the person who's speaking to me as a high elf and imagine that that's what they look like. And we can do it because we have imaginations. But the minute you look at a screen instead of a person's face, and and you see their name, you see like Dakota Travis or Jack Briarwood, you kind of forget what that person that you're playing with looks like and just see Jack.
Yeah.
Just hear Jack. And that's really interesting that's been, I think, the thing that has surprised me the most is how...
Yeah, like you didn't think that would happen, and it was just a wonderful surprise.
Yeah, I didn't realize how much more immersive that would make it, but by removing that element of suspension of disbelief. You make people more emotionally involved than maybe they would be. And people will say things like, I will fight with people in that game if we have a disagreement, like especially if you have a character that's like find the blame for Alice's disappearance, right? Like we will have a huge fight in the middle of that game that I would never have if I was talking to somebody at the table, because I have a hard time being that way vocally. But for the game, it's super important to have those moments, as long as everybody feels comfortable and we're checking in and making sure everybody's happy. Like those are really important moments to have in the story. And by removing that social awkwardness element of it, you're able to find that. And the reverse is true too. I found a lot of people and people that surprise me that I wouldn't think would be this way, but are a lot more emotionally vulnerable, and that you have this emotional intimacy that happens between players because they can type it instead of have to say it out loud.
Because it's easier that way. Wow, that's so cool.
Definitely look forward to. So tell us, when does the Kickstarter
so the Kickstarter
What's
hits
going on
the
with that?
Kickstarter hits June 1st.
Ooh.
Yeah, it is very soon for us recording, and probably already happening when this goes up. And hopefully we'll be well on our way by then. I'm hoping.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be there, and it's a 28-day campaign. So go and check that out. We have a bunch of options for pledges, including a Roll20 pledge that will get you access digitally, and also can have a pledge where you play with me, where I will run a game with you. That's sort of the long and short of it.
That's pretty cool. And also, are you gonna like show everyone all the things that you had to do to get it so that it can be hacked like in the next month after it comes out?
Here's the thing is this is a conversation we're having, because I have it with a publisher and I don't own it anymore. That will be a discussion I'll have to have with them, because Renegade and Hunters now own the game, which is sort of the trade-off, right? Of like, I want it to be able to be in game stores and have wide distribution, but doing that requires sort of signing over at least part of the rights to that. So that would be a discussion I'd have to have with them. I would love to be able to do that. The other thing is that the game has a very specific and tight focus, but my goal with it, like, it comes with 5 characters, right? And the game comes with 5. You can play with 5 max. So it's like, you might play, if you play with 5 players, the first game you play, you're going to use all of the characters, which isn't bad because they can be different and you can have these nuances and things if you play again. But one of the exciting things about it is that we've already been in talks, if it does well, of the possibility of doing booster packs, right? So doing 3 new characters, 3 new locations, 3 new suspects, 3 new motives, and a bunch of new clue cards. And then you sort of can get that, and it reinvigorates
the game.
It reinvigorates the game, or trying to find a way to like make it feel a little more like It, or Stranger Things, where you sort of introduce a supernatural element to it, which might be. Anyway, there's these sort of thoughts around how it could be used to tell other stories that I'm very excited about.
That's pretty cool. All right. Well, thank you, Spencer, for telling us about that. It sounds great. So our last segment of the podcast is always where we stop. We look back at the month and we talk about what has been giving us life. So, Jamila, what has been giving you life in May?
Yeah, so there's this new game that came out, video game. It's called Maneater. It is a shark RPG.
What?
You play as a shark. You just go around, chomping. It's so cathartic. I love jumping on yachts and eating rich people. It's really good.
Don't we all?
Right? And it's a revenge story. Without spoiling too much, you are a shark. You start out as a baby shark, and then you get bigger and bigger, and you get more and more badass. You can get electric teeth at one point. But you're doing this, it's a revenge story, basically. It's so cool. It's really good. It's so much fun just chomping on things and being a shark. And it's an open world game too. So it's really good.
Is it through Steam? Is it through... So
Maneater is on Epic, which is where I'm playing it. And it's also on PlayStation and the Xbox. But yeah, it's really a lot of fun, and it's cheaper. It's not a full price game, but it's a lot of fun. It just like you have to chomp each bite, and then you have to thrash them around. It's so good.
I really want them to do the like where they can capture your audio in the game, and then to actually chomp your mouth, you have to do that. That's a good
that'd be so cool.
a good additional piece of content where instead of pressing a button, you have to make the chompy noises. That
Yeah.
That would be great. Okay, and Spencer, what has been giving you life?
There is a podcast network called Parcast. I don't know if you all are familiar with it. They have a whole bunch of podcasts that are all on really interesting topics. So it's things like cults or conspiracy theories or haunted places or dictatorships, mythical monsters, secret societies. And they're just these, they have massive back catalogs of all of these different, like if you go to secret societies, it's I can't even tell how many episodes, but a ton of episodes, and it's all about like the Rosicrucians and the triads and all this stuff, and it's really good for if you're doing a genre game. I have some games that I'm like working on that are sort of in this secret agent kind of genre, espionage genre, and so you just listen.
I'm also working on one.
So great, yeah. So it's a really great resource to like. You just go and listen to a bunch of those episodes that, like, if you do the espionage one, they go through all the most famous and prolific spies in the world and what made them amazing and what was fact and what was fiction, and they're really well researched, and they flag when things are not necessarily true but are lore, which I think is really important, especially if you care about the history of them. They have so many. I mean, I'm just scrolling through all the ones they have here, and there's something almost for anyone who's interested in sort of genre podcasts, the darker side of things.
Awesome.
But yeah, so Sherry, what's giving you life?
Okay, so I have been in a project for the last 6 months, and it is finally June 5th will be done with. And I can see the light that's shining in my face, and that is the only thing that is giving me life right now, because there's so much to do between then and now, but it will be good. So it is the light at the end of the project tunnel is what is giving me life. So listeners, that's our show. Please, if you want to play fun games, if you want to find yourself a set of players who enjoy playing experimental things, story games, playtests of your game, consider checking out the Gauntlet. We love new people, we love new games, and we love old games that you want to run. So if you've got some favorites, bring them. Well, we have a Patreon. That is at patreon.com/gauntlet. That is where you would go if you want to join for playing games and have access to the calendar, which means that you see it immediately when a new game is posted. You can sign up and play. But you can find out all the things that we're up to, all of our information about our blogs, our podcasts, our publications, the online gaming options, and our forums just by going to www.gauntlet/rpg.com. Thank you for joining us today. Have a great June.
Yeah, see you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hi listeners, we want to let you know that Brindlewood Bay is now available on DriveThruRPG. Brindlewood Bay is a role-playing game about a group of elderly women, members of the local Murder Mavens Mystery Book Club, who frequently find themselves investigating and solving real-life murder mysteries. They become increasingly aware that there are supernatural forces that connect the cases they are working on, and in particular, a cult dedicated to the dark, monstrous aspect of the goddess Persephone will come to vex them. Brindlewood Bay is a cozy crime drama mashed up with Lovecraftian horror. It's Murder, She Wrote meets The Shadow over Innsmouth, and we think you're going to love it. Your download from DriveThru includes the rulebook for Brindlewood Bay, including a version for easy booklet printing, play aids such as the character sheet and dark conspiracy sheet, and 5 mysteries: Dad Overboard, All Hallows Scream, The Great Brindlewood Bay Bake Off, Jingle Bell Shock, and A Murder Most Mucky. We'll be releasing 10 more mysteries over the next few months. Some of these mysteries will be featured in the Codex magazine, and others will be part of a standalone mystery collection coming out in late summer 2020. The first of the new mysteries, Exit Stage Death, will be out this month in Codex Yellow 2, available through the Gauntlet Patreon. So be sure to check out Brindlewood Bay on DriveThruRPG. We'll include a link in the show notes. Thanks.